Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to social etiquette.
It's fair to say that our two nations utilize completely different social conventions, something I was reminded about by one of my patrons who messaged me this.
I saw a somewhat viral post where in certain northern European nations people have experienced being at a friend's house and their family would have dinner, but while their friend would go eat, they themselves were not even asked to join. So my question is, how do Brits handle feeding visitors to their homes?
The first thing that we say to guests is, sorry for the mess, even amid a completely pristine house.
After that, I've definitely been to UK houses where I was invited to eat with the household and others where I was not, and I must say, I was always fine with being left out, unless they cruelly dangled before me a plate of sausage rolls, or pork pies, or a Sunday roast. I've just realised I was never fine with this. I think Americans are just more predisposed toward hospitality.
And this is helped by the fact that fridges are often packed with leftovers, so there's just more to go around. On top of this, Americans just place more emphasis on things like family get-togethers.
This is often coupled with an open house mentality, meaning that anyone from family siblings to my wife's cousin's ex-boyfriend Braden might also help himself to a third plate of chicken wings. In fact, he did. At such gatherings, I've often heard Americans say something along the lines of, "There's coffee in the pot, knock yourself out." And while that last phrase isn't meant to be taken literally, I think people underestimate how much coffee I'm willing to drink, which brings us on to this. It's been observed by several experts, but also BuzzFeed, that Americans associate having a catch-up with consuming caffeine. And it's true, you'll often hear phrases like, "Wanna talk about this over coffee?" Of course, you might think that the British equivalent of this would somehow involve tea, but the more likely candidate from experience is beer. However, Americans have a much different relationship with alcohol, which serves less as a vehicle for casual afternoon chatter and more as an evening social lubricant every now and then. The concept of meeting for coffee fits America's relationship with coffee, which is consumed among Americans at 1.5 times the per capita rate of British people. In contrast to alcohol, coffee helps kick the brain into action, leading to livelier conversations as it stimulates those in attendance. That wasn't a euphemism. And while coffee houses and chains are gradually becoming more popular in Britain, they've still got a way to go to catch up with the selection offered up in America, not to mention the coffee sizes.
I've often heard that America, despite its association with wealth and material possessions, doesn't like to talk about money.
In fact, this was backed up in recent studies that found Americans would sooner fill their conversations with topics such as relationships, mental health, race, sex, and politics than with details about their earnings.
It's been a while for me, but I'm not sure this was altogether different in Britain. For instance, I never knew how much my British family members were making.
Additionally, there was even a time when I myself felt uncomfortable asking people to support Lost in the Pond on Patreon, which you can do at patreon.com/lostinthepond.
But it's possible that discomfort around money is even more intense in America, simply because the nation is home to a drastic gap between the rich and poor.
Discussing one's income has the potential to make those with less feel bad, whether it is they who are doing the talking or the listening. For this reason and a variety of others, I very rarely had discussions with Americans that revealed either party's financial worth. But Americans do talk. The suggestion has often been that they talk too much and certainly a few decibels above everybody else.
But I'm not entirely convinced that this is always true or particularly unique to Americans. In Britain, I had plenty of loud friends, something that became particularly apparent after those beers.
And even I might become loud and undignified if I win Vlogger of the Year at the 2022 Blogosphere Awards. To make that happen, go to blogosphere.biz/awards and vote for me once you get to step 3. And don't forget to vote for those two Brits in the travel category. Perhaps the stereotype persists because of how Americans present themselves abroad, or because of the often hammed-up nature of their film characters. But on the whole, I've never really found Americans to be much louder than the British. One exception to this might present itself at those family get-togethers, but these are not so widespread a feature of British life, and it's not easy to draw a comparison.
And It's not just volume, it's also the words we use. One weird criticism that often gets leveled at Americans is that they insert like between every other word.
Firstly, we should keep in mind that this is a generational thing, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine Abraham Lincoln saying 7 years ago, although it might have helped to pad out the Gettysburg Address, which was surprisingly brief. But the American use of like is often the source of derision among Brits, even though, through American influence, the phenomenon has long since caught on in Britain too. I've always thought of it as a hesitation marker, like and ah, an interjection that acts as an antidote to a sudden uncomfortable silence.
In that sense, it's a perfectly natural occurrence within human speech. But I know what you're thinking. Ooh, Lawrence, why does it have to be the word like and not some other monosyllabic word like ah?
Well, the truth is, you could also say the same about and It's just the way English panned out, and that's alright by me. I've often spoken about how Americans are more direct, but deep down, how does this present itself? Well, to answer that question, I should use my own country's style of speech for comparison. British people are more likely to employ linguistic techniques that help avoid any perceived conflict.
Tag questions. That's when you make a command or a statement and conclude it with an adjoining question. For example, you should make sure not to burn the French fries, shouldn't you?
That shouldn't you at the end changes everything. It softens the imperative clause that came before it, ensuring that the speaker doesn't come off as too militant or pushy. The British specialise in tag questions, whereas Americans don't typically use them in this way at all. Instead, they might simply say, "Be sure not to burn the French fries again, Lawrence." Not that I know that from experience.
I've heard it said, and I've noticed myself, that Americans sometimes take a long time to exit a social activity.
Now, this is not usually because they feel awkward about doing so. It's more because they have this remarkable capacity for saving their most critical family discussions for when their introvert spouse has just put on their coat. I can recall numerous times when an unannounced inter-sibling conversation added 30 minutes to our exit strategy, and all because someone brought up politics.
The British equivalent of this usually manifests not in person but over the phone, with British people saying the words yep and goodbye 47 times in succession before guiltily ending the call. Yep, goodbye, yep, goodbye, yep, goodbye.
And on that note, it's probably time for me to say my own goodbyes. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that I don't have to. Until the next video, goodbye.